Felly, pryn rhan da bawb a chroeso mawr i'r sesiwn cyntaf o'n Haf DPP. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our first session of our Summer of CPD. Ar ran y tîm cymorth i ysgolion gyda ieithoedd rhyngwladol Mhrifysgol Abertawe, hoffwn ddiolch i chi gyd am fynychu'r webinar heddiw. So on behalf of the International Languages support team here at Swansea University, I'd like to thank you all for attending today's webinar. Mae ein sesiynau Haf DPP wedi datblygu yn dilyn digwyddiadau ieithoedd rhyngwladol ar gyfer disgyblion ysgol a gynhaliwyd eleni ar gampws y Brifysgol gyda chefnogaeth Lywodraeth Cymru. A gyda ni wrth ein boddau yn gallu cynnig cyfres nawr o 5 webinar, 5 sesiwn DPP ar-lein, a gynlluniwyd o amgylch yr adborth a'r ceisiadau a dderbyniwyd gan athrawon. So our Summer of CPD events have been developed following the university's international language events for school pupils that have been taking place this past academic year with support from the Welsh Government. And we are delighted to now be able to offer a series of 5 online CPD sessions designed around the feedback and requests received from teachers following those events. Mae ein rhaglen o webinariau yn ymdrin ag amrywiaeth o bynciau a gynlluniwyd nid yn unig i gynorthwyo athrawon, ond i rannu syniadau, ysgogi trafodaeth ac anwyd creadigrwydd a chydweithio. Ac dyn ni i gyd felly yn gobeithio y byddwch chi'n gweld y sesiwn heddiw yn ddefnyddiol. So our programme of webinars is covering a wide variety of topics, as you can see here on slide. And they're designed not only to assist teachers, but to share ideas, stimulate discussions, encourage creativity and collaboration. And we therefore hope that you will find today's session useful. So we're joined today by Wendy Adeniji from Sanako, who is an experienced teacher, trainer, and author of language teaching resources with a distinguished career in education leadership. She served as a head teacher of 2 secondary schools and has previously worked as an inspector for Ofsted, giving her a deep understanding of effective practice and standards across the sector. Wendy brings considerable expertise in MFL pedagogy and school improvement and is widely respected for her work supporting teachers and leaders to raise outcomes and foster high quality language learning. And today, Wendy is going to be talking to us about building enjoyment and mastery in MFL speaking for the new WJEC GCSE. Felly, diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you very much. And over to you, Wendy.
Okay, thank you so much, Laura. And I'm going to share my screen now. And it's a real pleasure to be with you today for the University of Swansea. And I'm going to deliver a session that I delivered recently for a very similar, it was an outreach session for Leeds University last week. And we in England, as you can hear, I'm based in England, we have got a new GCSE similar to yours, and ours was first examined this summer, just gone. And we're actually really pleased with it here in England. It's a focus on high frequency language. It's a sort of less is more approach. So students are having to learn less and know less words, but they do more with what they know. And we've got things like the read aloud as well, similar to yourselves. So I'm going to talk you through some strategies, activities, hopefully some real things that you can take away and use straight away. I believe that this is being recorded, and also I'm happy to share my PowerPoint as well with you, which I'll do through Laura. You've also got my email address on the screen, and feel free to contact me directly as well. So we want to look in particular, I want to look at 2 things, both at Key Stage 3 with the year 7, 8 and 9, which is how we build the foundations, and then also moving on to Key Stage 4 as well. And I want to start with something called group talk, which was sort of first introduced and sort of fashionable about 20 years ago, actually, in around 2007. And it was introduced by someone called Greg Horton, who I've since worked with quite a lot. And I came across it in about 2010. And I was running some training on it, and I thought, oh, this sounds really good. And when I went back to working in a school full time in 2011, I put it into practice, actually, and I used it consistently. I had 2 classes. It was actually a brand new school. So I had 2 classes in year 7 that I took all the way through to year 11. So I took them for 5 years. And one was a top set, one was a sort of lower set. And languages were compulsory then. So all students did it. And I found it really successful. So using this sort of strategy for 5 years meant that the students really enjoyed speaking, that it was something that they saw as being fun rather than something that they didn't like. And it has a great impact in terms of enjoyment, mastery, and also eventually some, great GCSE results, probably some of the best GCSE results, both for the lower prior retainers and also the higher prior retainers. And it's recently sort of come back, made a bit of a comeback, partly I think because the new GCSE scenario that we found ourselves in lends itself particularly well with developing spontaneity, but actually it's just really good practice. And I did some training in North Wales actually a couple of years ago. In fact, it was a webinar similar to this, and then I went back and met with a group of teachers who've been using it in person, and they were really enjoying using it as well, and saying that the students were really enjoying their language learning. So I want to talk you through what that involves. I'll just nip back and share my email address as well, because if you do want to have a go with this, I've got a full set of resources that I've developed for all 4 stages of language of group talk in French, Spanish and German. So if you wanted to email me because you'd like those resources to be able to start using them, please do email and I'll send you a zip folder with all of those in as well. So what does it do? Well, it aims to mirror normal pupil talk more realistically. So the idea is, what sort of things are students talking about in the playground, when they're not in their lessons? They're usually sort of saying, well, I think that. They're always probably giving opinions, and it's probably about things that they're into in the moment, whatever it is they're watching, or YouTube people, or TikTok, or whatever it is that they are into. It could be singers, it could be anything that they like. That's probably more like what I like. I'm probably slightly out of touch with what young people are into, but it could be things that are on TV, for example. And it did get given a European Award for Languages back when we were part of the EU. And I really like that quote in particular, because the judges really liked the fact that students were enjoying talking. They were talking about cars, sports, school uniforms, and the fact that the conversations were organic. The pupils weren't speaking from a script, which is something we really want to focus on. So only the target language is spoken. You will start off with just a very small amount of time, and you maybe put a timer on the board and give students a target and say, right, we're going to go for 2 minutes or 3 minutes, and then you can increase it. I tended to increase it by 1 minute each time, so I didn't just do it non-stop. I probably would do it about once every 2 weeks in my teaching. It wouldn't need to take very long. It can just take 10 or 15 minutes, but you do need to do a launch lesson and teach them the key language and keep practicing that, and then bit by bit they remember the language and they start using it. It's a discussion and interaction between a small group of pupils. You don't need to have your classroom laid out in groups. You can have rows and just have a setup where students know that they need to turn around and then talk to the people behind them, so they know their little foursome, for example, that they're going to have their conversation with. The language is often colloquial, and it starts at a very simple level and then builds bit by bit as you go through the stages. And the results are hopefully, they do become spontaneous over time. Obviously, that does take a little bit of time and practice. So there are 4 levels of group talk. Roughly level 1 is year 7, roughly level 2 is year 8, level 3, roughly year 9 into year 10 possibly, level 4, year 10 into 11. So I'm going to show you, I'm hoping this is going to work. I've tried to share my sound. I'll just make sure it's on as high as possible. This is a little group of students, I think, speaking in German, and they are looking at some pictures, some fashion pictures, and that's what they're talking about.
Ik denke, die Socken ist sehr gut. Nein, ich finde, Socken sehr altmodisch. Stützspitz. Ich habe die Socken in lila und weiß. Entschuldigung. Ich liebe die Socken auch, weil es sehr gut ist. Ja. Ja. Ich finde die Buchstabenhälfte sehr altmodisch. Nein, der Buchstabenhälfte ist sehr sexy. Na und? Weil es war hässlich. Du bist hässlich.
Okay, so hopefully if you do speak a little bit of German, it was interesting. They were talking about describing things and saying the reasons, and they were using the word weil, which means because in German, and then sending the verb to the end of the sentence. And then one of them said, oh, I don't like that picture because it's ugly. And then the other girl changed and said, you're ugly, du bist hässlich, which was a little bit rude perhaps, but she was interestingly modifying her verb appropriately and conjugating it correctly, which we always like as language teachers. This is a group of boys in Year 8, and they're talking about different school subjects. And again, you'll see different levels of language. Some of them are quite repetitive, but hopefully what you see is that they all seem to know what they're talking about. There's emphasis and intonation in the language.
Ich denke, Schule ist okay.
Ja.
Ja, zustimmen.
Nein, Schule ist scheiße.
Du spinnst!
Nein.
Ich denke, Sport ist toll, ja.
Ja. Nein, Sport ist scheiße.
Was? Denkt Sport ist scheiße?
Ja.
Nein.
Nein, du spinnst.
Ja.
Nein, du spinnst.
Okay, when I spoke to Greg about this more recently, he said perhaps I wouldn't teach the word Shizer now, but obviously they did seem to enjoy using it. So there is something called a group talk progression chart, which Greg and his team came up with. As you can see, there's a Welsh section to it now as well. So I've done quite a lot of training to colleagues in Wales, and if it's something that you might like to have a go with, is maybe something that you want to show Welsh departments as well. And we've also got the group talk materials in Welsh as well. So do, if you email me and want them, do let me know if you think that might be useful. So that's stages 1 and 2, and you can see, hopefully you can have a look and see any languages that you understand. It's very simple language, but we do have some really nice colloquialisms like tu rigoles, you're joking, du spinnst, que va, estás loco, you're crazy. And I'm not going to try saying the Welsh one, but the students like that. There's questions, so they do have to ask questions as well as, but they also agree and disagree. So they say, oui, moi aussi, non, pas moi, je suis d'accord. And then moving into stage 2, they're saying things like, you're right, you're wrong. Again, things like, do you like, using qualifiers like a little, a lot, very, and also hesitations and time gaining phrases like alors, haber, pues in Spanish, and so on. So and those are quite colloquial and quite sort of natural language. And then moving into stage 3, we've got preferences, we want people to give reasons this time, and we've got sequencing devices like firstly, secondly, finally, things like that. And then into stage 4 is more about giving a balanced argument now. So students saying on one hand or on the other hand and things like that. So interesting. You don't have to use exactly the same, but you can see how the language progresses as well. And the sorts of language is a Spanish example here, is students are agreeing, disagreeing, expressing surprise, uncertainty, disinterest, rejection. So probably more colloquial perhaps than some of the language we traditionally teach. Just a few examples of some of the support mats. We recommend giving them a support mat with these key phrases because they're going to end up using them over and over again, talking about different things. And also I'd always give the English meaning in a support mat, but you don't want them to become overly reliant, and bit by bit you can give faded support. So you reduce the support like this, even eventually down to just giving them the English as a little reminder of what what language they need to be using. So we've got some different examples here in different languages. And we can use things like these sort of speaking frames like a sentence builder as well, to support where students can see the structures as well. And then we'd recommend doing some practice beforehand. So after you've introduced the language, and you can practice it using sort of mini whiteboard practice or choral repetition, but then doing some listening activities where students are hearing the sorts of phrases that they're eventually going to be using productively, but obviously receptive before productive is always good practice. So things like break the flow activities where they would hear you perhaps saying, "Qu'est-ce que tu aimes manger?" They would have those sentences all squashed together, and then they have to decide where the different words would be split. I've got obviously the answers here. Spot the missing word activity is quite nice. So here you've got an example. They're going to listen to a similar conversation, but there are some words that are missing in the text that they're going to hear. So let's just check we can hear this as well as possible.
Qu'est-ce que tu aimes manger?
J'adore le chocolat, c'est délicieux. Et toi, Sophie, qu'est-ce que tu aimes manger?
J'aime manger les frites car c'est fantastique. Et toi, Lucas, qu'est-ce que tu aimes manger?
So that's just a little bit of an example of the missing words. And you can also do things like spot the difference, again with a similar sound file where they're listening, but they're working out what the difference is. And that is sort of focusing on their micro listening activities. They're not listening for meaning, but they're spotting different language and hearing, spotting, being able to hear words, and that will eventually help them with the skill of speaking. And then we've got things like a trapdoor activity, which you've probably come across, which is I just saw that last week actually at a school in Liverpool, being really well done. And that is again using the language. So if you imagine the students are going to be talking about food and giving their opinions about it and saying why they like it, or using me and car and a. There's trapdoor activities where they work in pairs. One of them has decides which of these three options they're going to choose for each of them, and the other one has to say and guess which one. So they have to speak it out loud. So they might say, "Je préfère le chocolat," and if their partner says no, that was not the one they were thinking of, they have to go back to the beginning. So then they would try "J'adore le chocolat," and if that was wrong, they'd say "J'aime," it must be that one. And they have to go through each one, and each time they get it wrong, they go back to the beginning. So it's a good way to practice and do in a repetitive game-like way. They are practicing the language that they're eventually going to need. This is a really nice game. This works well for just learning vocab. So obviously, if we want students to be developing confidence in the skill of speaking, they need to know some language. They need to be able to come up with some things. So maybe after you've taught some of the group talk or any sorts of phrases you want them to be using in the speaking, then the bob-up game is a nice one. And I've used that right from year 7, even all the way up to year 11. It's a great one for leading up to the GCSE when you want to maybe choose some key language. So students, you put them in 2 or 3 teams, you number them in the target language, and then when you say their number, by the way, first of all, they all have to go through and you need to practice. I'll show you it first of all. So you would go through first, you practice the pronunciation of this key language. So you'd say, "What do you think of? Que penses-tu de? I love, j'adore, I like, j'aime." So you're practicing it, they're listening to it. And then we're going to cover up the target language. And then the game is that you would perhaps say numéro 2, and all the number 2s stand up, and then you will say one of those phrases in English. So you might say, "You're joking." And the first student to answer correctly, but they have to say the English followed by the target language, because that helps them to make the connection. So they'd say, "You're joking, tu rigoles." The first one to say that right gets just a point for their team, and you just do a tally on the board. And then you say next one, numéro 5. The number 5 stand up and you say "they are," and do the same thing. But the important thing is that they have to say the English followed by the target language. So you can adapt this and use that for any sort of set of language you want to practice. And well, obviously with year 11s, this is a year 7 version, but with year 11s, I would have a much longer version. So students like that, obviously you can have points taken off them if they shout out, when it wasn't their go, things like that. But it's a really nice gamified way of practicing speaking and also retrieval practice. It's always a good idea. You can either do oral, but also mini whiteboards are a great way to check for whole class understanding really quickly. These are obviously English into the target language, which is a bit harder. And it's also really nice to practice the language that you'll be wanting them to use through songs. And songs are a great way to help language stick. So if you've ever heard the start of a song, maybe on the radio, that you used to love as a teenager, even just the first little bit of music helps you remember, and you'll probably start singing along to it, even though you've thought that you've long ago forgotten those lyrics. And there's a lot of research to show that there's something about music that helps us to memorize and remember things. So not only are songs fun, but they're also really good to enjoyable to sing, but also really good to help memorize a language. So I used an AI tool here called Suno, a song creating tool, to create that language in a song.
Et toi, Lucas, qu'est-ce que tu aimes manger? Maxime, et toi, Sophie? Et toi, Lucas, qu'est-ce que tu aimes manger? J'aime manger les frites, car c'est fantastique. Et toi, Lucas?
Okay, so hopefully you get the idea there. Just see if I can move on. And yeah, that is Suno, which is suno.com, and that is a free website. You can paste in some lyrics and it will create you for free 2 different types of song. If you use the paid version, you get 4 different types of song, but you can get to choose the song style. So you can choose like rap or pop or reggae. So really recommend using something like that. And then eventually you want students to talk about something. Now you could have pictures that appear on a whiteboard, so you can have visuals. As we saw in the video, students were talking about some fashion items that they had on their desk. I've done it before where I've had a series of laminated cards in the middle, and the student would turn up one of them, and then they would talk about that, and they would go around in a circle. One would say, they would give their opinion, je pense que c'est fantastique. Could then turn around to the next one and say, que penses-tu, because I want them to be asking questions. And then they all go around, give their opinion, and then the next person turns over the next card, and so on. If you can't afford the lamination or it's too much effort, you can just put things like that up on the board. I would recommend that you have pictures of things students like and also possibly dislike as well, so that you're going to have negative opinions as well as positive. In the other video, we saw boys talking about school subjects. You can have even just words, like you could have names of famous singers and things come up. So it's up to you, but the important thing is to choose things that have got an opinion about. So clothes are always good, football teams, even cars, pictures of cars, Christmas jumpers, fashion, food is always something people have got strong opinions about. There's lots of different things you could think of, and people in Wales who are teaching Welsh also use it. You've got to do the poster, so they have to have opinions about that as well. So at Key Stage 4, people might have something that's a more in-depth thing to describe. And then finally, at the end of that session, so it doesn't need to take too long, because bit by bit you're hopefully going to increase the amount of time that students are saying it, but they won't be talking for that long. You could perhaps get them to write 5 sentences in their books, so you've got some sort of record of the sorts of things they were talking about. And then to make things a bit more advanced and developed, especially say moving into year 9 and then higher up, you can give students a bingo card to encourage the use of high value, high frequency phrases as well. So this would be an example, and they would cross off and try to use as many of those phrases as possible. So you're trying to increase the level of complexity. And then just finally, this is a Spanish example. I showed this to my Spanish class, I think at the beginning of year 11, and said, you're going to be as good as this by the time you finish year 11. And they were like, no, miss, we won't be able to. This is my top set, but they definitely were able to sort of be as good as this, which was great. And you'll see some of the phrases coming up in Spanish, and these are some that they've got a support mat, and they've got some sentence starters here to support with their conversation.
Go. Now.
¿Qué haces para mantenerte en forma? Pues yo hago mucho deporte. Juego al baloncesto todos los días, señor.
Has dicho que los deportes son importantes, pero yo creo que una vez la semana es mejor.
Yo estoy de acuerdo cuando dices que el deporte es importante, pero pienso que es más importante relajarse.
Ni hablar. Hacer deporte es muy relajante. Y, aunque has dicho que el ejercicio es importante, también se debe comer bien. Así es verdad.
So hopefully you could see there the expressions of agreement, disagreement, like the one we've got on the screen. And it's really nice to sort of listen to those organic conversations as well. These are the sorts of pictures you could show. These are where I've put them up with some sentence starters up on the board as well. There's a website in America, or it's probably an Instagram thing now, where students upload pictures of school dinners. And obviously that one's not too pleasant. This one is a series of pictures that were taken of people from all over the world with all the foods that they eat in a week in front of them. This is a Mexican one, which is quite nice. And we've got one from Chad here as well. So interesting cultural things that students can talk about. And obviously always nice if we can have pictures from the countries where the target language is spoken as well, apart from France, Spain, etc. So the impact that I found was that students taught more confidently, their oracy skills improve, pupils, especially boys, I would say, were more motivated to speak, their questioning skills improved, and another side benefit is not the reason why we do all of this, but their GCSE speaking tests improved, and they just really enjoyed speaking. There was a lot more speaking that happened in lessons as a result. The next thing that I want to talk about, and in a way this is sort of a step back even before you get going with group talk, would be to focus on the teaching of phonics to improve students' pronunciation. And basically the idea is that synthetic phonics means teaching a particular phoneme and focusing on that phoneme, and maybe focusing on all the words students know with that particular phoneme in, and then using that to teach the rules of pronunciation essentially. So if you've ever had children go through primary school, it might be a way that they've been taught how to read and write. In England, it is like the law. Everyone has to teach children to read and write in primary school using the phonics methodology. I don't think it's the case as much in Wales, but it's perhaps something that you might have come across. But it is not about introducing a new word and just teaching pupils how to pronounce it. It's sort of going back a step and basically saying, right, with the R sound in French is pronounced a certain way, the double L, the Y sound in Spanish is taught in a particular way, and then reinforcing it like that. And the idea is that in French, Spanish and German, those languages are very strict about their rules of pronunciation. So once you've taught the rules of pronunciation and the key phonemes, then they can apply that to any new word that they come across. So it's much more efficient, essentially. Saves you having to reteach how to pronounce every single new word that you come across. You're just teaching the rules, the phonics of pronunciation. It's actually a lot easier to teach the French, Spanish, German ones than it is to teach the English ones, because English is only 40% phonetic. I'm not sure about Welsh, actually. Welsh might be a more sort of a strict rules-based language. I possibly think it is, but English has got lots of, because we've had lots of invasions from Anglo-Saxons, French, from all over, we're only 40% phonetic, so we've got lots of different ways of pronouncing particular letter strings, whereas French, Spanish, German are very rules-based, which is really handy when you're teaching a phonics methodology. Ofsted is into it in England. You probably don't need to bother about that, but I think more importantly the research says that this is really good practice. And there's a lady called Professor Cathy Rassell based at a university in London. She often does the keynotes for research ed conferences. She did a big piece of work a couple of years ago, and she basically created a brand new language, and she got 48 adults to learn this new language. They had 18 hours to learn the language in. The novel words basically means these new made up words, and half of the adults were taught the phonics, so the sound, spelling, correspondence, and the other half had to work out, discover the rules of pronunciation. And the amount of instruction only took about 3 hours, so only 3% of the whole teaching time actually, so less than 3 hours. And as we can see here in this nice picture, the learners who were explicitly taught it, all of those in blue, worked it out, only the 2 didn't. And the ones who had to try and work it out, discover it, which is less than half, I think, were able to work out. So it shows, and it's a really nice visual to show that the explicit instruction, the explicit teaching of how to pronounce something is really helpful. And when I think back to when I learned Spanish at school, I remember, and I was a pretty good language learner, I'd already learned French and I was doing Spanish in 2 years to GCSE. And it took me about 6 months, if not more, to work out that C was pronounced differently. There's a rule in Spanish, it's either a hard C or a soft S or a th sound in Spanish. And it just is basically a rule, and it all depends on which vowel follows it. And it took me quite a long time to work this out and realize that there was a rule, and I could just apply that to all the new words I came across. And it would have just been really useful if my teacher had just said that at the beginning, because I would have then remembered it and applied it. And it's similar to that with French, Spanish, German. So altogether, in French, there's 36 phonemes, in Spanish, there's 25, and also in Italian, 25, and in German, there's 44, the same as in English. And these are the most difficult phonemes, the ones that students often mispronounce. Ones that are easy are exactly the same as English, so like the S sound in English, or the M or the P, are identical, so there's no point, you don't even need to teach those. So you don't need to teach all 36 in French, you just need to focus on those key phonemes and also the silent letter rule, and that will be about 20 different items that you need to teach, and you don't need to spend very long on it. You can do it in about 10 or 15 minutes. Ideally, you would choose a phoneme per week, possibly, definitely no more than one per lesson, because you don't want students to get confused, and you want them to have had a little bit of exposure to the language, even like 2 or 3 weeks maybe, so they know a few words in the language, or if they're coming from primary school with some of those words, that's great. But you'd need them to know things like greetings, maybe numbers, maybe a few animals, anything that you would normally teach in the first few weeks, in order for them, something for them to hook their learning onto. A methodology that I've developed and that schools really like, and that use a lot in England, and I think some schools have been starting to use in Wales as well, is called Planet Phonique, or Planetas Phoneticos, or the German equivalent. And what happens here is that the students, each planet is an imaginary planet, of course. So we've got like La Planète Wa, El Planeta The, for example. So they go and visit a planet, and only the words that have that particular phoneme can be found on that planet. So it's just a little fun way to teach and introduce particular phonemes. So we ask students if they can think of any words with the wa sound in, and they will tell us.
La planète Wa.
And then we go and visit.
La planète Wa.
And we see what words come up.
3. Croissant.
Bonsoir. Au revoir. Soif. Froid.
Now, obviously, yours would be different depending on which the students have learnt. And then there's a listening
La
activity.
Côte d'Ivoire.
This
Le
is kind
Cameroun.
of, this is zooming through a little bit. It's decided to do it automatically. But students would hear 2 words, and they would just have to identify
Seine,
which of the 2 words
la
have got
Loire,
that sound in.
La Reine. Il était une fois
And then they would also
un
do
homme de
a tongue
foi
twister.
qui vendait du foie dans la ville de Foix. Il dit, ma foi, c'est la dernière fois que je vends du foie dans la ville de Foix.
And students really particularly love that, and they will then practice that tongue twister, and then at the end they'll be given
Moi,
some new
toi,
words.
boisson, victoire, soir, joie.
That one zoomed along without giving me any chance to talk to you about it. So basically they'd practice the tongue twister. You would probably do some choral response together, so you can practice it first of all. They go away in pairs practicing it, and then you would give them some new words that they've not come across with the focus phoneme in. I could just give them 10 seconds in pairs, have a go at saying those words to each other, and then let's hear the correct pronunciation. And that is at a very low level at year 7, is practicing the key sort of technique of read aloud, which is students applying their phonics knowledge to new words. And obviously bit by bit you'll include words that have got more phonemes in that they've learned as well. So that sort of structured technique is a really good, it's both a fun way but also a structurally sound, research evidence-based way to teach phonics using micro listening activities in a fun and motivating way. And the feedback is that students particularly like the doing the little tongue twisters and rhymes. And when they do the micro listening activity, they'll either hear 2 words and they just say, is it the first or second that I've got the focus phoneme in, or they might hear a little rhyme or a song, and they would do a tally of the number of times they hear that word. So it's all about improving their, I would call their sort of listening ear, by exposing them to sound rather than thinking about meaning. They're just thinking about sounds. Now, we obviously have Ofsted in England, and I'm sure you don't want to hear about that, but there has been a focus recently on phonics, and the lead inspector, Bianca Zemka, who is the lead for MFL, has put together what she's seen when she and her team go into schools in terms of strengths that they see in phonics instruction and also areas for development or weaknesses. So I thought you might be interested in these. And what they say are strengths are the direct and systematic teaching of phonics, needing to be based on this clear understanding of the phonics of the language, and ideally feature as part of a planned approach. And then weaknesses will be the opposite of that, essentially. So little thought and no systematic approach. So that's not really rocket science. But just to say, when people say to me, well, which phonemes should we teach and when? I put HT stands for half term. I would definitely say it needs to be front loaded into the year 7 curriculum, because you don't want students getting into bad habits. Once they've got into the bad habit, for example, saying me lamo in Spanish for me llamo, they find it really hard to then get into the right habit. So you want to front load it and probably even start earlier, maybe halfway through the first half term, and do quite a lot of phonemes in the autumn term, especially the most common ones. You want to do the high frequency phonemes first, the ones that come up a lot. You definitely want to do silent letters pretty early on because they come up a lot in French. And then the less common phonemes can happen a bit later. But by front loading it, yes, you are taking a bit of time out of your curriculum, but probably in the end, it's only 1 or 2% of a whole 5-year course. But you're giving students the tools to pronounce language accurately, which gives them confidence and self-efficacy. And it means that you don't get to year 9, year 10, 11, and you're having to, keep, reminding them, correcting their pronunciation, which is a little bit dispiriting for both you and also the student. And then just so we don't leave out Spanish and German, Spanish has got less phonemes to teach explicitly, and German has probably got a similar number to French. So those are just suggestions from me. They don't have to be done like that, but they are some examples of good practice. So as I promised, we're now going to move on to some further development of spontaneity at Key Stage 4. In England, we've got 3 themes in our speaking exams with AQA, and this was a really nice idea that was given to me, where in year 11, especially as students were coming towards their speaking exam, they would get to the door of the classroom, the teacher would give them 3 laminated cards, and I've given you a few here, 1 in each coloured theme, and the students had to go away and they just had to, in pairs at the beginning of the lesson, ask each other and answer those 3 questions. So, and the idea is you have to say something. You're not allowed to just say, no, I don't know that, even if you don't know how to say very much. It's about trying to say something. And ideally probably asking rather than students being able to read what's written, because they've got to get used to what do those questions mean and be able to answer them. And in this way, the school that I was working with last week in Liverpool, they've said that this is one of the methods they've used, and it's been really effective at helping their students to become more spontaneous. And they said this year their students did the best they've ever done in a speaking exam and were able to have a go, even if they weren't fully confident. And it wasn't scripted, it wasn't these sort of ready-made learned answers, but it was just having a go at being able to answer as well as they could. Another nice activity, this is another example from a school on the Wirral, Michael Graham, where they have a dice game. So you would roll 2 dice, you can do this in small groups, and then whichever, obviously based on which 2 dice you roll, whichever one you land on is, you would have a go at answering that question as well as you could. And then the students can all have a go on it, or they can just take it in turns to roll the dice and see how they can answer those questions. So they would be questions at random, and these are on each of the 3 themes. This is an idea from Adam Lamb, who leads MFL in a big multi-academy trust in England called United Learning. I really liked that. He has this as a retrieval idea when students enter the lesson, a bit like a do now starter activity type idea. And we've got bronzes in the middle, and then silver, and then gold is around the edge. And the idea is the students can choose 2 or 3 of these to translate. You could get them to translate them on mini whiteboards, which is never a bad thing anyway, because you want them to develop their writing skills. But you would then cold call and maybe pick a few students and ask them which ones they chose. And if they choose the gold ones, the harder ones, they get 3 points for each of those, maybe 2 points for silver, maybe 1 for bronze. Obviously, there's not very much bronze option anyway, but the idea is to try and push them. But also they can see the English of the sorts of things that you want them to be saying, and then we've got them in different tenses and so on, and some questions in there as well. And you can, you could even have a challenge to stretch them or able, see how many you can manage to translate. I think it's also important to teach students exam technique as well, and train them in how to come across, or how to have a go at answering things in the speaking exam. This is quite nice what we've got, and I'm not exactly sure how yours is going to be marked next year, so it's obviously important to attend any speaking training you can from WJEC. And the way that we've sort of worked it out from the way that our speaking exams are marked is that students need to have 3 clauses to achieve well. They don't need to give a really long extended answer, but if they have 3 clauses and use 3 different verbs, then they are going to get high marks. And it's all about accuracy. So sometimes less is more, as long as they're giving those 3 opinions here with the 3 clauses. These are some nice examples. So we can exemplify things like that for students. So we break it down. We're aware of what the mark scheme gives the best marks for. And then that will help us to sort of teach students to be successful in the exam. Because it's one thing, speaking spontaneously, enjoying, but the important thing, obviously, we want them to get into their speaking exam and to try and maximize their marks as well, which is, they get taught that in every other subject. The exam technique of how to maximize your marks on the mark scheme is important. So anything that can exemplify that is really helpful. Obviously, you will sort of do that based on what your own mark scheme will look like. And then this is something that I've used. I've often taken year 11 classes in the last few years of my career who are sort of bottom sets, not really wanting to do a language. We've got the EBAC in England, or we used to have it, and students got sort of forced to take a language. And they often weren't very good at the beginning of year 11. So I'd give them a really simple structure, and we'd use this for all of the different speaking topics, where the first question would be preference, the second one would be description, the third would be a past tense question, and the fourth would be a future tense question. So we've got our different tenses in. And I'd use the same structure. I'd start off with giving them some sentence starters and some pictorial support. And we'd start off, and then we'd maybe run for a few weeks on one particular question, or 2 to 3 weeks, and use it at the beginning of each lesson. I would definitely try and have about 15 minutes of speaking activity in a lesson, just to get them used to that, and that sort of fits with the amount that they are going to be examined as well. And then bit by bit, we'd reduce the support and to pictures only, and then just to the questions. And because they get used to it, it becomes a routine. They get good at being able to answer those 4 questions about a particular theme. Okay, I'm just going to have a go now at showing you something called the Sanako Connect platform, which has been quite popular in Welsh schools, and I know quite a lot of schools in the EAS group use it, working with Sinead. And it has not only French, Spanish, German, but it also has Welsh built into it. And students can use it in particular to practice their pronunciation. They can do speaking activities, both in lessons, but also really importantly as homework. And they can also hear good models and practice pronunciation, and teachers can set and mark speaking homework. And what's really handy is students can receive personalised feedback on the quality of their speaking. And you can also do things like whole class speaking assessments. So I'm just going to stop sharing this now and have a go in a second at sharing. I'm not sure if this is going to work for me, but I'm going to have a go at sharing this, just because it's quite fun, and it's nice to be able to practice your pronunciation. So just checking, can you see me on a different tab now, Laura?
Yes, I can see the Sanako tab.
Yeah, great. Okay, so I'm just going to join my session, and we can do some practice activities where students are going to practice some language and they can check some key phrases that they're going to need in a forthcoming speaking practice. They can do a drag and drop type of activity and then go to the next page. They can listen to a good example of a role play here so they can hear a model of what a good one sounds like. I'm not sure if this will come through. I'm not sure actually if I did you hear that okay, Laura?
It was quite faint, my side.
Is it quite faint? Right, that could be yeah, because I'm sorry, I'm not on my full sound. So let's have another go. So I can also slow it down, which is quite nice. I can rewind it and play it again. And I can do things like do gap fill activities or multiple choice. They all get automatically marked. But one of the things that students really like is that they can practice pronunciation, so they can prefer a male or female voice. They can slow it down, listen to an example. J'aime le foot. That's a relief. It likes my French. And the teacher can put in any text. So you can put in a bunch of text, you can put in a role play, and it will split it up into separate sections and then create an AI-powered set of responses that students can then practice with their pronunciation. And what teachers are finding is that students can practice this at home. It works on mobile phones, and they can get confident. And if they get the the 5-star feedback, if they don't get the full, it's not well pronounced, it will highlight and underline any mispronounced words and not give them 5 stars. But they can have another go and practice again. So students in this way can practice. They can improve their pronunciation with this AI automatic feedback, and then that gives them the confidence that they know how to pronounce something. And then finally they can this is one of the new sort of role play styles of the new exam. They can insert their voice, they can listen to the teacher utterance, and then they can have a go at recording. If I can pause now and say, j'aime jouer au foot. Je voudrais jouer au tennis, s'il vous plaît. So here I'm inserting my voice, so I'm replying to the teachers. This is in a leisure centre. You can see that I've got the instructions here, so I can see that the next activity is saying what sport I want to do. Then I've got to ask a question, which is c'est combien, and so on. So when I've done all of that, I can say I'm ready and submit my work. And then
Wendy, sorry, just to chip in, I'm wondering if perhaps we're seeing something different to you. I'm not seeing, I don't think, the activities that you're doing. When you mentioned then that you were able to see that it said something about sports.
Yeah. Right, yeah. Let me just see if I might be showing you the wrong. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So here I was yeah, this was where I listened to, can you see that okay now, Laura?
Yeah, I think that's correct now. Perfect.
All right, yeah, that was when I did the pronunciation and I got the 5 stars, and I don't think it's going to let me do that again because I've just gone back. I can try the next one. So I could have a go listening to an example, pronouncing it, and then here was when I listened to the question and then I recorded my own answer here, and my answer was just, that was me answering. And so what teachers can do is they can go in, listen to that, and then they can actually give some bespoke audio feedback to students, or you can just use the sort of computer automatically generated feedback. But it's a nice way for students to be able to, in the comfort of their own home, to practice their pronunciation and then have a go and submit some work to their teacher as well. So I just thought we would have a little look at that. And I'm now just going to finish off by, where are we? Yeah, I'll just finish off by showing you my last couple of slides and then give any opportunity for questions. So I'll go back into my final couple of slides. So yeah, that's what it looks like when the students mispronounce something, as an example, and then the teacher can see how many attempts the students made. They can see how much they got on their latest score, and it's just a way of holding students to account as well for doing homework, and then obviously giving them some bespoke feedback. So just coming to the end of this session. And to let you know, in fact, this just by chance, I happen to be doing another webinar this evening where I'm looking at assessment with someone called Alex Havers. You're very welcome to join it, but I know it's a hot evening and obviously England are playing. You may or may not be into the football. But if you do register, you get the recording sent to you anyway for free. It's a free webinar, and myself and Alex host a number of webinars to support teachers. We're also have recently developed a mastery curriculum for French and Spanish, and we piloted it in England last year, and we're piloting it in a couple of schools in Wales as well this year. And if anyone's interested in being part of the pilot, again, do email me as well. So any of the things that I've talked about today, the group talk, the phonics activities, if you're interested in the pilot or being involved in any of the webinars, I can see you've got some great webinars that Swansea's running as well. But, you know, CPD is a fantastic opportunity to hopefully, you know, share and share good practice, hear good practice, and hopefully develop our teaching. So I'm going to finish my sharing here. I'm going to stop sharing now so that I can have a look and see if there's any questions at all. I'm just going to join the chat. And in answer to the suno.com, thanks Laura for putting that in. Yes, in answer to your question, Suno is free to create songs, so really recommend that one. We've just got a few minutes left, so if anyone has got any questions for me, really happy to stay on and
I'm
listen.
wondering if the question regarding is it free, I think that popped up during the Sanako.
Yeah, no, so the Sanako isn't free. That's a license-based platform. There's a free 3 months trial, and I know that there's quite a lot of funding in Welsh schools. I know, for example, depending on what area you're in, that some of the like EAS and some of the sort of consortia do fund it for schools. So if you're interested in it, do get in touch with me and we can work out whether or not you might be able to get it as part of the free you know, licenses that have already been bought for Wales.
Thanks, Wendy. And there's
In
a
terms
question
of
regarding recording answers.
Yeah, so
re-recording.
So I think I was wondering whether that was when I was recording my answers. I was listening to an answer, then recording what I thought. So students can re-record it, but it doesn't delete what they've already done. So they just re-record it next to it. And teachers sort of say that's fine because you say to the students, well, I'll just listen to your final version and mark you on that. But it's kind of nice to see that the students have sort of attempted something as well, and that they're thinking about what they've done and then improving it. So I say to my students, well, I'm really happy that you've thought about it and decided to re-record it. So don't worry about that. So yes, you can re-record. Yeah, so Sanako does, so depending on the headset, so if you are doing it all together as a class, schools would have noise cancelling headphones ideally. And so again, I've been into lots of classrooms in South Wales. I was in St Kenned's recently and Caerleon and Bedwas, and they had a big class. All the students were there with their headsets and microphones, and they were all doing the speaking tasks simultaneously as well. And it also will allow for the students to hear the teacher speaking, and then the students will all hear the teacher's voice live and can answer a question, and then all of their answers get uploaded into the teacher's area. So it's a nice, efficient way as well to do one of those, you know, speaking assessments that can take ages because you keep asking the students the same questions over and over again. So yes, it does block out almost entirely the extra sound going on in the background.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, any more questions? Well, I want to say thank you so much for attending this webinar, probably on a baking hot day, and you know, sitting in front of your computer. I really appreciate you coming to this session. And as I said, please do get in touch if you want any of the things that I've mentioned. Really happy to share things like the group talk resources, the phonics, and talk to you more about the Sanako platform or the mastery curriculum as well.
Brilliant. Well, diolch yn fawr iawn I chi, Wendy. Thank you so much for joining us, and to you as well. I appreciate it on a very, very hot day. It's not easy. So thank you very, very much. I'm sure everyone found that really useful. Diolch yn fawr. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
You're really welcome. Goodbye, everybody.
Bendigedig. Well, diolch yn fawr iawn I chi I gyd am ddod. Thank you so much to everyone for coming. As you've seen, we have another 4 webinars lined up over the next few weeks, so hopefully we'll see you all again then. Felly, diolch yn fawr a hwyl fawr. Thank you and goodbye.
Diolch.
Okay, diolch. Diolch.